Welcome back to Accrued Interest. Today, Sunday, April 6th, I'm doing the second edition of my weekly recap show, Sunday Scaries. Because instead of sitting at home on your couch, fighting off the existential dread of your inbox on Monday, why don't you listen to this podcast and we can recap the events of the week and give a look at what lies ahead. As always, I'd like to start with a brief disclaimer that the information presented in this podcast is not and should not be construed as investment advice. Investors should make their own decisions regarding the prospects of any company discussed on the show. The theme of this week for me has been There Will Be Blood. I know that might sound dramatic and it might remind you of the 2007 Oscar-winning movie by Daniel Day-Lewis, but I'm talking about a different There Will Be Blood. JP Morgan's research desk came out with a report that for me encapsulated my feelings on the incoming recession the best. So in today's episode, I'm gonna run through the highlights of the report and talk about some economic events for this upcoming week. JP Morgan's report had three main points I'm gonna go through. First, they said that if the tariffs that were announced last week were sustained and go into effect, they would effectively amount to the largest tax hike in U.S. history since 1968. In their report, they gave out the history of previously large U.S. tax hikes going back to 1941. If the tariffs went in force, the increase in 2025 would be about 2.4% of U.S. GDP in terms of U.S. taxes. This is comparable to back in 1968 when they experienced a similar shock where the increase was about 2.6% of US GDP. Secondly, JP Morgan argued that the tariff shock would be magnified by retaliation from other countries. There'd be disruptions in the supply chain, and it would cause sentiment to nosedive. What they pointed out was China, the biggest trading partner we need to watch out for, instituted retaliatory tariffs about 34% on U.S. goods. Thirdly, JP Morgan argued that the risk of recession to the global economy would be raised to about 60%, up from a prior forecast of 40% they had before. I love scenario analysis. When I was in college, I was a probability major. JP Morgan had an interesting decision tree where they showed all the different ways this game could play out. The first scenario in the recession case assumes that U.S. exceptionalism unwinds. They give it about 20% odds. That means the US falls into recession, but the rest of the world experiences modest growth. In the third case, the worst case, but probably the most likely, they call that case misery loves company. They give about 40% chance that we have a global recession that's kicked off and led by the US without other countries coming to our aid. Reminder, the goal of the week for you is not to try to get rich or to time the bottoms. I recommend that you stay vigilant, stay defensive, and prepare for the incoming recession. A couple events to keep on your calendar as you watch the markets. On Wednesday, April 9th, that's the date that the tariffs are expected to kick in. If we don't see much news of changes before then, you could see stocks fall even more. The next day, on Thursday, April 10th, we're getting some more inflation readings. We have the core CPI being released for the month of March, and we're going to have initial jobless claims released as well. As always, stay tuned to this channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and stay tuned for Sunday Scaries as we navigate the week ahead.